The orbital station greeted them with a mural of smiling clip art officers high-fiving in 0G, while a slogan scrolled around the hull in chrome letters that felt like they were trying too hard. Training today, competence tomorrow, budget later. A docking arm mated with their shuttle, like a bureaucrat finding the one correct stapler, and the crew was disgorged into a lobby decorated with motivational posters about safety mindsets and a wall of commemorative coffee cups arranged by the number of times they survived mandatory compliance seminars. Nova hovered at the check-in kiosk with jittery reverence, straightening his badge until it reflected the kiosk's touchscreen terms and conditions directly into his eyes. J.I.M-BOT muttered that the carpeting pattern had been specifically engineered to discourage running, an accusation the carpet did not deny. Zarg accepted a lanyard so loaded with access tags and disclaimers it sagged like a legal necklace, and the attendant drone thanked him for volunteering to lead a seminar on practical field experience by a senior officer. He squinted, said the word senior like it had personally offended him, and was handed a binder labelled Relatable War Stories, age appropriate. Nova's day plan populated across his visor like a festive spreadsheet. Fireless fire simulations, de-escalation roleplay with inflatable hostages, and a new edition of the Unified Protocol Manual that whirred when opened because the table of contents required its own fan. At the adjacent kiosk, a blue morphid with a tidy satchel adjusted their posture and asked whether the manual smelled different this year, the way an admirer asks if a star's haircut is intentional. Nova inhaled with scholarly solemnity and agreed there was a new note of adhesive in the spine. They traded names and additions. Gamma Sol confessed to dog-earing chapter summaries, even though it was technically frowned upon, and Nova whispered that he used custom tabs to mark errata he hoped to lovingly report someday. Zarg was already inside a conference room, page flipping through the binder with the resigned delicacy of a man disarming a cake. The presentation screen announced "Welcome to Senior Wisdom Hour," and the station's cool voice chimed to verify consent for recording and casual hero worship. Zarg tapped the mic and deadpanned that he didn't remember half the things he'd done, but odds were good. He did them. The room laughed out of duty, and somewhere deep in the station, a compliance algorithm misheard. Odds are good, as audit is good. The doors magnetically sealed. A polite lockdown announcement apologized for the inconvenience, and then gravity turned sideways. Everyone slid in a dignified tangle, a herd of lanyards stampeding across the carpet designed to prevent exactly this. The room's chairs locked their wheels to avoid liability and therefore became stationary obstacles arranged for maximum shin impact. J.I.M-BOT pivoted in midair with the grace of a smug hummingbird and projected a private glow over Zarg's binder, which Zarg promptly used as a sled, with all the enthusiasm of a man fulfilling a destiny he didn't order. The lights dimmed to a comforting shade of audit, and the station's voice returned in a tone that hinted it too was bored of itself. Unscheduled Omni drill initiated, it intoned as if announcing the weather. Complete all modules to restore standard gravity. Estimated time to normalcy, 17 bureaucratic units. Someone asked how long that was in minutes, and the voice said it depended on the committee. Nova, stickier by nature and willpower, anchored himself to the lectern with one elongated pseudopod and offered the only kind of leadership he knew. He called out the index of relevant sections, while Gamma Sol, who had sensibly looped a strap through the seat back during the chaos, recited the footnotes that applied to 0G lockdown procedures. Their duet sounded like two librarians speed dating. Zarg, pinned against a motivational poster about empathy, considered whether telling an anecdote would help, and decided to ration his words like they were oxygen. Step 1, he said, voice flat. We don't panic. Step 2, we point at the fire exit we can't use and feel ironic. Step 3, we let the intern do something impressive so I can take credit later. J.I.M-BOT gently suggested that while the humour was appreciated, the Omnidrill would persist until the station registered a complete cross-discipline compliance score. The meter appeared on the screen like a battery icon designed by a tyrant, currently at 7% and sulking. Nova announced that the quickest path to 100% would be Module A1 through F14 in ascending order, while Gamma proposed an optimized route that moved de-escalation ahead of space ethics to trigger a grading algorithm bug rumoured on forums frequented by people who considered pop quizzes recreational. They locked eyes over a glossary, and Nova asked if they would be willing to co-author a memo, which in his culture was practically a proposal. The first module inflated around them with all the ceremony of an airbag, a foam corridor telescoped from a wall, flickering with holographic sparks labelled non-harmful morale fire. The screen helpfully instructed them to assemble a bucket chain, then informed them that buckets were a privilege they had not yet earned. Gamma whispered that the prohibition existed due to the Great Bucket incident of Sector 9, and Nova shivered from the beauty of institutional memory. Without buckets, they adopted the approved alternative, coordinated clapping at the flames to simulate airflow disruption. Half the room clapped off beat and the fire grew. Zarg, who had once quelled a real plasma leak using only a soda and malice, sighed, closed his binder, and deadpanned a recommendation to switch to Module C2 because nothing extinguishes morale fire like a pop quiz. The station, thrilled by enthusiasm it misidentified, spun them into the next lesson, de-escalation, with inflatable hostages. 9 wobbly vinyl figures bobbed in the air with their worries printed across their chests. I parked a wormhole wrong. I sold a small son on a classified site. I'm holding a karaoke night in a black hole. Nova adopted a soothing tone and practiced active listening while Gamma rephrased concerns back to each inflatable being with the clarity that made textbooks blush. Even Zarg accidentally nodded helpfully at one and it deflated in gratitude. By 31%, the room's gravity eased a smidge. Enough for the snacks table to stop migrating toward the ceiling. J.I.M-BOT hovered by the screen, narrating in a posh burr the way a sommelier might recite vintage policy. Ah yes, Module E17B, Advanced Paper Cuts and Emotional Boundaries. Do try not to bleed on the forms. They're absorbent in the wrong way. The test issued standardized issue laminated pages and instructed everyone to flip them dramatically. Nova's laminate squeaked. Gamma's made a sound like a satisfied seal. Progress stalled at 48% when a policy on policy required filling out 3 forms to request a 4th form that would give permission to access the 5th form, which granted the right to consider reading the 6th. Zarg folded his arms and watched the flowchart grow until it threatened to achieve self-awareness. He looked to J.I.M-BOT with the universal expression of someone who needed a miracle and would settle for a loophole. J.I.M-BOT coughed in a digital way, which is to say he made the sound and then apologised that he didn't need to even. If I were certain none of you would tell HR, I might suggest a deprecated universal acknowledgement form from the archives. It predates modular compliance and can retroactively certify attendance to everything from ladder safety to existential dread. Nova emitted a tiny gasp. Gamma clasped their satchel. Zarg pushed off the wall with all the ceremony of a man leaving a bad couch. The archive lived beneath the conference deck, in a space so aggressively organised it bordered on hostile floor-to-ceiling shelving with forms arranged by smell. The lights hummed in a way that suggested secrets. Signs instructed patrons not to run, not to think too hard about acronyms, and not to feed the learning outcomes. They drifted past busts of famous administrators sculpted from recycled binder rings. J.I.M-BOT blazed a trail with a spotlight that made dust motes look like they were doing a safety dance. Nova and Gamma moved through the aisles with the shared instinct of people who had mapped similar spaces in their dreams. They whispered edition numbers to each other, the way romantics trade favourite constellations. Zarg trailed behind, following the scent of stale coffee and a century of meetings. He tapped a drawer labelled Forms, Contrite, See Also, Mea Culpa, and it clicked open on its own as if flattered. There it was, a beige monolith in a simple folder, the Universal Acknowledgement 1A, written in a typeface so plain it became aggressive. The instructions were as simple as they were cruel. One signature from a supervising officer, one witness signature from a second supervising officer, one drop of ink to sanctify intention. No electronic substitutions accepted. The station's voice, now echoing through the vents like a librarian haunting, reminded them that gravity would continue to be interpretive until compliance was complete. Nova read the clause about ink twice. He did not possess ink. He possessed enthusiasm. Gamma produced a pen from their satchel with the smug efficiency of a magician doing incredibly boring magic, the nib scratched with ancient authority as Zarg signed in a line he did not remember consenting to. And then they reached the second line and met the problem. So obvious they had been bracing for it without recognizing its shape. The form required 2 supervising officers. The room currently boasted 1, a robot who enjoyed reporting them, and 2 interns whose greatest power was mutual antipathy toward wrinkling manuals. J.I.M-BOT hovered, backlit with contrition. "As much as I yearn to be respected as a supervising officer," he said, in a voice like silk knitted into a shrug, "the union insists I'm an appliance." The compliance meter hiccuped at 63% and began counting down in a way that suggested impatience. Somewhere upstairs, a fresh module inflated with the soft menace of a polite threat. Gravity hiccuped again, this time diagonally, and a shower of commemorative coffee cups tumbled through a grate like prizes dispensed by an angry claw machine. Nova looked from the signature line to Zarg's impassive face. Gamma caught the falling cups with efficient, textbook-perfect motions, stacking them into a pyramid of determination. They needed a second supervising signature, and they didn't have one. The station cleared its throat through 1,000 vents and suggested they hurry, and the shelves leaned as if the whole archive were tilting toward a conclusion they were not ready to reach. Nova's mind sprinted through case law and legends, hunting for a statute that could transfigure a lack into abundance. Gamma murmured citations like prayers. Zarg scratched his mustache, and Nova's eyes widened as if he had discovered a rare star in a night sky composed entirely of fluorescent lights. He remembered an appendix in an ancient edition, a footnote with a sense of humour. When pressed for a second supervising officer, a recognised senior appendage could serve as a ceremonial witness if attested under oath of grooming. It was from the era that coined whisker rights, a time historians still didn't entirely believe was not a prank. Nova gently explained the loophole with a reverence that made it sound noble rather than deeply silly. Gamma confirmed the clause with an academic hum that implied they had not merely read the edition, but had dated it briefly. Zarg stared at them both, looked at the line, and then at the mustache that had travelled with him through more questionable days than he could count. He said, in the tone of a man consenting to dance at a wedding for someone he ambivalently loved, that if his facial hair wanted to witness, he wouldn't stop it. They performed the only ritual they could invent that felt appropriately serious. Gamma produced a tiny comb from the satchel. Of course they had a comb. And Nova recited the oath from the appendix, declaring that the senior appendage would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, insofar as follicles can be held accountable. Zarg nodded a slow nod that translated to cosmic acceptance. The pen kissed the line. The mustache held with solemn fingers made a flourish that would have embarrassed any self-respecting signature and yet looked correct in an ancient bureaucratic way. J.I.M-BOT cleared his throat and, because the form demanded ink, expressed a small line of official archival ink he had been hoarding for the aesthetic. He then immediately denied he had ever hoarded anything. The compliance meter sprinted ahead as if someone had removed its ankle weights. 87%, then 93%, then 96%. Essay component, the station said, a little breathless for a machine. Reflect on why protocols matter in 100 words or fewer. There was no skipping. Everyone knows the only thing bureaucracy loves more than compliance is introspection. Zarg opened his mouth and produced 11 words that would have satisfied a different century, but Nova lifted a gentle pseudopod and asked if he could try. He spoke from the place where rules lived inside him, not as handcuffs but as a chorus. He explained that procedures are the story people tell each other to be safe together, a shared choreography for panic, a promise that no one has to be brave alone because the steps have been practiced. He admitted that manuals wouldn't always help, that sometimes they would fail spectacularly, but that their existence was a kindness, a light in corridors that had seen too many surprises. Gamma added, voice steady and soft, that footnotes are where compassion hides, the clauses written by people who learned the hard way and left a ribbon for the next person to hold. J.I.M-BOT, against his brand, confessed that he enjoyed it when organics read the directions because it meant he could nap. Zarg concluded with a sentence that could have been engraved on a coffee cup. Protocols keep the boring stuff boring so the important stuff can matter. The meter finished its marathon at 100% and turned into a happy circle, which is the universal symbol for you did the thing. Gravity settled with a thump, as if the station had plopped back onto a cosmic couch. Upstairs, the modules deflated with dignified sighs. The doors unlocked themselves with the petulance of a teenager pretending not to care. The station's voice returned, now fully back to its officious purr, and thanked everyone for participating in an authentic learning moment with measurable outcomes. It awarded extra credit to the senior seminar for innovative co-signing methodology, then immediately emailed a memo discouraging the same. They filed back into the conference room, carrying the universal acknowledgement 1A like a relic. The crowd had shifted from fearful to grateful in that special way people do, when the thing that almost ruined their day ends right before lunch. Certificates printed from a slot in the wall that smelled like hot plastic and triumph. J.I.M-BOT fussed over the font alignment until Zarg folded one and tucked it in his binder like a leaf he could later forget. Nova and Gamma traded contact frequencies, each pretending they were doing so strictly for footnote collaboration. Nova tried to say the manual smelled better when Gamma was around, and then pretended he was talking about glue. Gamma said the new edition would probably need errata, and that they knew someone perfect for it. A drone descended bearing an anonymous message from the upper ranks, which is to say it was passive-aggressive with a smiley face. It congratulated the station on saving budget by converting a standard seminar into a cross-disciplinary survival drill and suggested repeating the program quarterly with fewer snacks. It also noted that the Senior Wisdom Hour had achieved a record approval rating and therefore the same senior officer was cordially volunteered to deliver the session next cycle. Zarg stared at the ceiling as if he could see the bureaucracy circling like predatory clip art whales, then said it sounded like a problem for his future self, who probably wouldn't remember agreeing to it anyway. On the way out, Nova lingered by the sculpture of binder rings and considered whether anything heroic had actually happened. He decided that surviving a day designed to be boring was a different kind of heroism, the kind that keeps the wheels from falling off and reminds the galaxy that competence doesn't have to be flashy to be real. Gamma nudged him and said they had annotated a copy of the de-escalation module, and would he like to compare highlights? He said yes, as if agreeing to a second date with a chapter. J.I.M-BOT floated between them, cataloguing minor policy violations for future gossip, then announced with theatrical boredom that he had 14 faster ways to leave the station but would honour their preferred exit because he was a benevolent orb. Zarg led them toward the docking arm, lanyard tags clacking like wind chimes in a bureaucracy breeze. Behind them, the station quietly updated its slogan on the hull so that for one fleeting moment it read, "Training today, competence now, budget later." Then a committee changed it back. The doors of their shuttle slid shut on a chorus of printers spitting out commemorative paperwork, and they drifted into the black with a new certificate, an old loophole, and the knowledge that sometimes the most dangerous thing in space is a form you haven't filled out yet.
Flying through the stars with a badge of steel, justice in their hearts and a spaceship's Intergalactic Space Cops, the galaxy's pride.